Celtic Ligers.
Recorded on 29th of October 2023.
So Mark Maron, we were talking about the early days of his podcast and how he's...
Well, you're talking about commodifying friendship.
And then we were like, fuck, we're not recording this. This is valuable insight to our 12 listeners.
But for Mark Maron's, we were just to catch up, for the 500th episode, he interviewed his dad.
Yeah, after like spending all this time talking about like how difficult the relationship he had with his father, and then finally, having it out with his father for the 500th episode, and I was just like, it was very convenient to find a way to resolve your relationship with your father for this milestone in your podcast.
I think for his like 200th or so, one of them, he interviewed himself.
I remember that he did interview himself.
Had someone interview him or something.
Yeah, no, they had somebody interview him, but he was the guest on his own show for one of the seminal episodes.
So much. Like, it was just like, I don't know.
But he it was quite funny because he was known to be like a fucking bollocks.
Yeah.
And then he was on that thing Air America, which coincidentally we were just talking about Michael and us, but remember they at one point there was a documentary about Air America. If you remember it was what's his face, Al Franken.
Oh yeah.
Do you know Al Franken? He started up like a radio station that was meant to be like a counterweight to conservative talk radio. It was going to be left-wing talk radio, and then that didn't really last that long. It had like Janine Garofalo, and then they would get like Ralph Nader on and just yell at him, "You're a spoiler candidate." Just like, it wasn't left wing, it was more like liberal. Actually, Sam Cedar started out in that as well. Do you know him?
Yeah. Now Al Franklin is disgraced.
Yeah, he is. And like a lot of people, I remember what happened was like, well, if we're going to have one rule for all these people, we have to abide by the same rule. And then they were like, Al Franken's going to fall on his sword. And then they kind of were like, now this will expose Republican hypocrisy. And a number of people will be demanding for resignations. It was like, no right-wingers suffered any consequences.
Yeah.
And then they're like, and now you see, like, I've seen Sarah Silverman, funnily enough, like in recent years, just go, he's been out in the cold too long. We need to bring Al Franken back in. We need to be able to forgive, and it's, well, he's caught in friendly fire, all this type of shit,
Yeah.
Ironic now.
Basically, our bluff didn't work, and it's not fair.
Yeah.
But what were we talking about? Mark Maron.
I was talking about how, like, Mark Maron was also on Air America, and then when Air America, like, fell through, he went into the studio and just started recording podcasts, just like ranting and raving, and that was like the start of the thing. And then we were also saying about how he eventually got, like, Robin Williams was probably his most high-profile guest, and then all of the other people felt more comfortable going on after that. But, like, they would come on and they would talk about how he was, like, mean to them. Because he would just be like... But he has this vision of comedy, which is like, I'm like a fucking rock star. That's what... Comedy's like rock and roll, man. And he plays his fucking guitar at the start and tries to get real with people and talk about politics. So, like... He hated, just on site, Eric Andre and Tim Heidecker and all that kind of crew. So, like, he would have them on his podcast, and then they would be like, I don't know why you were such an asshole to us. And then he would be trying to explain it to them, and it was like, it doesn't make any sense. Just that he thought that they were, like, fucking...
Yeah, his thing is they're literally just like, you're not doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
Because his whole shtick is like, who are your guys? Where'd you come up with?
Exactly.
And, like, he basically wants it to be like 10 clubs in the conversation.
Yeah.
And like 15 comedians. And he just wants to be like, did you start in this club or this club? And did you ever do this club? And then like Tim Heidecker would be like, oh yeah, I did like a random web series and I worked as a camera. He used to do wedding photography or something. And he's just what are you talking about?
I could stop listening to the podcast after. I was like, one thing he would say, he would go, he would try and find out if somebody was Jewish, and then if they weren't, then he would try and figure out whether they'd ever been or were from Albuquerque. And then that would essentially be like the first 10 to 20 minutes of every interview.
Yeah.
and it was driving me fucking crazy. Do you know?
He had Chris Gethard on, and that was like, it was so confusing for him.
Yeah.
Chris Gethard, he's the guy.
Chris Gethard. He was on Broad City and stuff. I saw him in Edinburgh. I have to tell you about that in a second. It's very funny.
He just seemed to like have such contempt for him.
For Gethard, really?
Yeah, and then there was one bit where he won him over. It was just like Gethard did a club somewhere or something like that. And then he was like, "Oh, maybe you're okay," but like,
"Oh, you did Twizzles as well."
It was basically that.
You know. That back room was crazy. Like, those guys would just go all night, you know.
Oh, I think it might have been he'd heard of like a zine or a magazine.
Yeah.
And then he was like, "Oh, maybe you are okay." He just likes the signifiers.
Yeah,
most
I loved him.
So many of his early episodes were just like, he'd have Louis C.K. on, and then he'd be like, "Let's get through this. You know, let's get through why we fell out." And it was always like, "Yeah, you're an asshole to me." Yeah. And then there was one, who was it? And they were like, I'm not accepting an apology. It's like, I'm not angry at
That's
you,
funny.
but I actually just don't give a shit. Like,
yeah.
You're just a prick and you just have me on for your podcast. That's okay, but like, we're not friends.
That's funny. I'd love to know who that was. I'd love to see that.
Could it be the guy... you know, there was an episode of Louis, the sitcom, where... there's some major comedian on, and Louis says that he stole one of his jokes. It's someone like...
Fuck, I don't remember that.
Maybe he did like... He had a reputation as being like a real stupid comedian. Like,
Bobby Kelly?
No. He was like massive. Did he have puppets?
Dane Cook?
Yeah, it could have been Dane Cook.
Oh... Jeff Dunham? Oh, Larry the cable guy.
I think it was Dane Cook.
Interesting.
The other fella, who did you say the other fella was? Not Larry.
Jeff Dunham.
He was like really racist, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's really racist.
I think it was Dane Cook.
Yeah.
It was Jon Stewart. Matt Crowley writes for Vulture.com on July 15, 2015. As Maron told Straumola-Bulos, he contacted Stewart so he could apologize to him on his podcast. He said, "I called his office and he called me back, and he doesn't call people, and he's like, hey. I don't know if you remember, you know, what a dick you were to me back in the day. There's no love here, man."
There was one that I saw. The one that really kind of broke my heart was Simon Amstel was on. Do you know?
Yeah.
And I actually like for a long time, for a while there, I was obsessed with Simon Amstel's first special. It's a wild one. It's very vulnerable, and some of it was funny, but at the time I was like,
comedy's important, man. You know.
Yeah.
And now I've kind of changed my programming a lot on that. I think after Trump, I probably decided that actually comedy is not important, you know, or something like that, you know, like it was some feeling where all like Seth Meyers and all these people just come out guns blazing and going like, you know, Robert Mueller is gonna own President Trump, and then you're just like nothing happens, and you're just like, God, this is so. Anyway, I don't know what I was getting at, but the thing is, I had Simon Amstel on, and Amstel was just loving being there. He loved the kind of recognition of Mark Maron and to be in the garage and to be talking to him. And then he said at one point anyway, he's like, yeah, I started stand-up very young. Oh yeah, how old were you? And he was like 14. Okay. And he's like, where were you performing stand-up? And then he was like, at my drama club. And you could tell like Maron just immediately like nothing but contempt for Simon Amstel from this point on, because the idea of doing like stand-up comedy as part of a variety show when you're 14 years old, like,
that's not fucking stand-up, man.
Yeah,
stand-up is where you stand up there with your, you know, leaning on a chair, just talking about your fucking divorce, you know, and like, God, I was just me and
what's that fucking fat guy that he was friends with and he kept talking about? Sam Kinison, the guy who would just shout all the time.
Oh yeah.
And he would talk about Sam Kinison.
and how like, yeah, me and Kennison just hitting the strip and like, we didn't know where we'd find our next hit. And I just had to realize I had to get out of that lifestyle. I had to get out of that place.
And it's like, that's real shit. And then, he's like, oh, I'm like Mick Jagger, and I kind of strum on my guitar. But anyway, with Simon Amstel, he just fucking clearly did not like him. And then at the end, he was like, well, Simon Amstel was telling a story, and then he just finished it. And then Maron just goes, all right, well, thanks for coming. And he goes, are we done? I mean, do you want to talk more? No, it was really lovely being on, and thanks. All right, well, thanks. All right, we appreciate that.
All right, so that was a great guy, a British guy. I'm not sure many of you know of him, Simon Amstel.
Yeah. Did he ever have Stuart Lee on?
He did, and he loved Stuart Lee.
Really?
That was the other thing that was funny. They got on so well because, and one of the things that Stuart Lee said, which like puzzled me for a while, he was like, he brought up Richard Herring.
Yeah.
And then he was like, I'd say he's like the British equivalent of you, actually, to Mark Maron. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Mad.
Just because they record podcasts, I guess, but it was still like such a weird comparison to make.
That is funny. I suppose Stuart Lee has the ability to like talk club comedy as well. Like he's done all the shitty gigs, and he was never like a drama kid.
Yeah, and he was never. Well, he did do like weird stuff, but he's like
he did
he's
weird
not
stuff,
like,
but he also just did it in clubs where people hated him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
there's something like punk rock about him that like that Maron can get on board with.
Yeah.
But like, what was it that he said? He's also like Stuart Lee. Whenever he's being interviewed, is so funny. He's like this like dirty laugh that he does all the time.
I know. He's such a different character, isn't he?
So he's really like just avuncular and kind of like.
Did you ever get divorced?
It's always. Did he get divorced?
Got divorced recently enough.
No. No, that's sad.
I had the exact same reaction. It was like, I'm like a feeling in my gut, like my heart dropped.
Yeah.
Because
I was upset. I always liked that they were together.
Same, me too. And then so many of the he always had that joke I liked, and it was like how he was away and he needed new underwear.
Yeah.
And then he bought new underwear, and then he came home and his wife was like, are you having an affair? And this is when they were just married, you know?
Yeah.
And then like 15 years later, same thing happened. He was away, and he was needing new underwear. He bought them, and he comes home, and his wife goes, "Oh, new underwear. Did you shit yourself again?" And it was just like, there's no chance of having an affair in their eyes, you know?
That's good.
That joke's funnier when he's married. When he's not married,
yeah. They've actually been living separately since 2021. They only announced it recently, but they've actually been separated for ages.
They announced it because he was at Edinburgh, and he's going out with someone else, and then
no way,
going out with some like Twitter
19-year-old. It just seems like.
No, I looked her up. She's young, but she's not that young.
Okay. Did you ever see the one like Eric Warheim's?
Josie.
Is that his name?
Josie something.
He's not dating Josie Long, is he?
No, I don't. Let me look it up before you go on. Stuart Lee.
Rosie Holt. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that her? Really? Okay. I haven't seen.
Yeah, Rosie Holt.
Interesting. Okay.
And she is. Let's get rid of the age gap allegations. Rosie Holt is 5'1". 30-something. Let me look at it.
Okay.
She. Why doesn't she have her? Let me find out how old she is.
Okay. Oh, that one. I don't know. I've just seen stuff that she's doing of like that fake newscaster type stuff. I find that stuff insufferable.
I know. It's like a pastiche of a pastiche, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, how old is Stuart Lee?
I think he's probably in his 50s now. I don't think she has it online, and she's not like big enough that anybody would be asking for it.
He's 55 and she's mid-30s.
This is
Or
unbelievable.
like-
She's at Kilkenomics
What's
this week,
that?
next weekend. It's some stupid thing set up by David McWilliams down in Kilkenny,
I'm gonna
and
go
it's
and
also the reason
firebomb
why.
Said David.
Because recently, like I found out about it because of I knew it because I was in Kilkenny and I saw some signs for it around the place and it looked really lame. But recently, do you know when the Web Summit happened, when people pulled out?
Yeah.
David McWilliams, he was like, "Hey, Web Summit's loss could be Kilkenomics' gain," and so he just started to get in the mix, and it was just like, "You're just a shameless asshole, aren't you?" Because
Yeah.
I found an article where this is from ages ago where he was interviewed by The Village, and he's like a big fan of Israel, loves Israel.
Really?
So anyway, yeah,
He's not even ambivalent. He's just like they're class.
yeah. No, he's like I looked up the article itself, but like he's being interviewed about it, and like it's one of the funniest interviews because you know his kind of usual thing of like doing his pop culture kind of like affects, and I don't know how to put it, but basically like. Most of the time he's being interviewed and he's talking and the interviewer like doesn't know enough about what he's saying to push back on him in any way.
Oh yeah.
Or they just don't care to. But
It's like
yeah.
I don't know enough about clouds to refute that.
Yeah. But this person is like gives him like kind of like he says like some absolute bullshit and this person will be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" It was a really funny one. If I could find it, he's called like something about the rock star economist, but yeah, it goes into about Israel. But anyway, sorry, I could have crossed you, but because I saw she was in the Kilkenomics thing. But what was the
point of that?
What were you saying? You were talking about Rosie Holt
That she's mid-30s.
and fake news.
Oh, it's just like it's almost that sort of skit. It's like, you know, when you see people do parodies of ads, and it's like,
Yeah,
"Hey kids, get a load of the whatever the fuck 3000," and it's like,
yeah.
those ads haven't been on TV for like 50 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't remember. The last ad I remember like that was for like a Super Soaker. Do you remember?
Yeah.
But people are just like, oh yeah, when you do a parody, it's so divorced from reality.
Yeah.
So much of that, like, skit about the fake news or the broadcast thing, it's like, I just hate it. Like, The Onion do it, and they're funny, but that's about, they've just been doing it for 50 years, so it's fine.
Yeah. But I also think, like, when you think about, like, Brass Eye or you think about the Day Today, you know, the Chris Morris stuff, like, they'll ask him about that.
Yeah.
I remember him being interviewed by, like, John, whatever. What's his fucking name? You know, the guy with the white hair who retired there recently.
Jon Snow?
Yeah. And he's saying, I think it's Jon Snow, but Jon
Jeremy
Snow is kind of
Paxman?
asking him. No, Jon Snow. I think it is Jon Snow. But he asks him, like, oh, like, what's on, you know, with Trump and everything, all that's on at the moment.
Great
It's kind of like,
question.
it's crazier than anything that you could have come up with. And he's basically trying to explain in vain to this guy who's like, well, like that wasn't really the point. He basically, what he was trying to say is that it was satire, do you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm trying to come up with like the wildest shit. It was that like the pomposity of the news at that point was begging to be skewered. do you know?
Yeah.
But the thing that I've kind of like, I don't know if he said as much in the thing, and I'm just repeating him. I hope that that's not the case. But like, I would say that voice doesn't exist anymore. Like, it's thoroughly the serious newscaster and the serious kind of advertisement or whatever. Like, they don't exist as like a common thing anymore.
Yeah, like the register of so many of the things. Like, the great thing about Brass Eyes, the register was like that old school, like, what is it called? Received pronunciation.
Yeah,
It's like they're essentially like a school teacher informing people of what's important.
yeah.
Whereas the thing now, it's like, I don't know, it's just different. I'm
Yeah,
looking.
well, it doesn't. I just think it doesn't work because like those type of things, like the media is basically entirely fractured, as opposed to basically like people would just come home and the news would be on, and it would be like 9 p.m. the news. Here's the news, and then people would talk about it the next day, or the papers, and there would be like this kind of seriousness to it. Except now, basically, everybody's a journalist because they can
Now
film,
it's-
record,
it's-
opine. You know.
Yeah, it's entertainment. You know. And
Yeah.
I'm actually looking through the Kilkenomics lineup for 2023. There's about a fucking million people on it, but anyone I recognize, it's so random. So
Yeah.
I won't go through all of them, obviously, but
I bet you Blindboy's on there. Blindboy's there. Isn't
I
he?
don't see him yet, but there's Rosie Holt. There's Paul Howard. There's a load of like economists.
Yeah.
Who I don't know who they are. Pascal Donahue.
Oh God.
Martin Ngolo.
All right. Yeah,
Like I've no problem with Martin, but it's like it's an odd one.
I think it's because the idea is that they're trying to mix comedy and kind of economics, and like Kilkenny has cat laughs, so that's kind of the natural fit there. But like, you know, like we were talking about David McWilliams, he hosted the panel after Darragh O'Brien left.
Yeah.
They had a string of guest hosts, and then he was found to be like one of the best ones. And then apparently, and I'm dying to watch those episodes now that I know more about who he is and the type of person he is.
Kevin
you know?
McGahern.
Yeah,
Kevin.
but I don't know if they'll be talking about economics. It's just going to be like an overlap with all this type of stuff, and maybe there'll be panels, and then they'll have a comedian on, and then it'll be like, you know, talking about fucking deficit spending, and then this guy's going to be like, I don't know what these lads are on, but you know.
I hate that sort of stuff because it's like you're gonna see the comedian like staring into space until he hears like a word. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he can just go off in a riff, and everyone just watches him do that. Andrew Maxwell was on it.
Do you know what I know?
Didn't
just
Andrew
while I
Maxwell,
remember it,
he's not the one.
didn't he have some sort of scandal or something? I thought he did, but no. He couldn't get booked in Ireland for a long time. I know that. I don't know what it was over.
Yeah, but obviously he's been welcomed back into the Kilkenomics fold.
Yeah, well, he's been welcomed, like, you know, like most predators. No, he's not a predator. I'm probably going to put a timestamp on that to make sure that that's removed. I do not know whether Andrew Maxwell is a predator, but what I'm saying is, like, if anybody's done creepy behavior, there's nothing too weird and creepy that they won't be welcomed back into the Irish comedy scene without a second's thought, you know?
Yeah. Well, there's some feigned reticence, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just going to see what events Martin Ngolo's doing.
But the other one that I want to say is I've been dying to find out what Stephanie Preisner thinks about Israel-Palestine. And she fucking continues to deny me.
I know, I'm taking your point. I just feel like, say Carl Spain is on this, right?
Yeah.
And the events he is going to be on include, what if the Fed makes a mistake? Cathedral thinking long-term in a short-term world. Jargon busting, and then is Ireland full? The immigration.
No, stop. No.
See, Dylan Moran. Let's see actually what David McWilliams is hosting himself.
This is such a fucking.
He's hosting privatization of stress. The economics of the new Cold War. Is doing an episode of the David McWilliams podcast. 4 big ideas to change Ireland.
Do you know that the David McWilliams podcast is like the biggest in Ireland as well?
It was
like one of the most listened to.
Yeah.
He was on our sister podcast actually as well.
What?
He was on our sister podcast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, he wasn't. Sorry, Fintan O'Toole was. I was trying to remember. There was somebody some sort of fucking liberal arsehole who I was like looking at it. I was like, I mean, I understand, fellas, but I'd never fucking talk to that gobshite.
Fintan O'Toole wrote to us and was like, I have this new book out and it's about how the Irish pint took over the world or something like that. I'd love to come on to Celtic Ligers to talk about it. Would you be okay with that?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't. No, I would say no. And I like. It sounds like you wouldn't say no. But like when I was running that comedy night, the Black Hole in the Wall, I did say no because they were like, "Would Neil Delamere play there?" I was like, "No."
Yeah.
Couldn't picture that now. Sorry. Imagine that. Imagine fucking Dave McSavage on at a comedy night that I ran. You'd just be like, Jesus Christ, you know?
That'd be deadly. And it was just like, because of the Black Hole tonight, it was like so, what's the word? Like, you saw stuff there that you wouldn't see anywhere else. And then Dave McWilliams would get up and he'd be like, well, that was something.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he'd just be really uncomfortable.
The other thing that would be funny about it is that, like, one time somebody went on and, like, they were unexpectedly misogynist. I didn't choose them out. I didn't anticipate they would say something that was misogynist. But anyway, somebody in the audience just stood up and went, "Fuck you," and walked out, and the whole set just fell apart. So I just feel like, you know, and also the audience, I would love to see, like, Dave McSavage up there, and then it's like I don't know. And there was another person who performed there, and then they had a joke which was, I thought about being vegan, but then I realized that I didn't want to be a prick. Okay.
Yeah.
And so they were like, they start the joke and they go, "Is there any vegans in the house?" You know.
Ooh.
And then obviously like fucking 90% of the room put up their hands. But anyway, there was like somebody in the front row. She like singles out and then just go, "Oh yeah, why are you vegan?" He's like, "Because I didn't want to be a cunt." And they were like, "Oh, yeah." Yeah, I thought about being a vegan, but I didn't. I didn't want to be a prick. And then it was just like, anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
It's just all this stuff. That was like probably the thing that I was most pleased with, is cultivating an audience of people where it's like, you know, the kind of general, you know, fucking pint comedy consensus kind of couldn't find as much purchase there as it could in other venues.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a good way to not make any money. So, you know what?
Yeah, I know. It's funny the way like we talk, and it's like, oh, we're criticizing stuff being so careerist and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like everything we've done is just alienating to people, and it's like if there's a bit about it that can make money, we're like, that sucks. Leave that out, you know.
Yeah, because like, yeah, sorry. I lost my train of thought. I was trying to organically bring in a certain interaction you had with the high profile
Blindboy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I told
I wasn't figured out
didn't I?
Huh? No, you didn't. You didn't.
I didn't.
Because we haven't had the podcast back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I met Blindboy in Limerick, was hometown, because I was doing mic drop comedy, which was a very good night. And it was me, and then I won't mention his name, but he hosts a bigger podcast, and he's from Kerry. And
well, actually, he doesn't host that anymore.
That's true, yeah.
For privacy's sake, let's call her Lisa S. No, that's too obvious. Let's say L. Simpson.
But so I was standing in the club, and then the organizer of the club came down and was like, "This guy at the door, and he's claiming to be Blindboy, and he wants in for free, but none of us know what Blindboy looks like." And then the headliner was like, "Oh, I know, I met him once or twice. I'll go." And I went out to follow him, and then it turned out it was Blindboy, and we all sit down, and Blindboy keeps looking at me, and then he goes like, "You're James Bourne from Celtic Ligers, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And like, I knew that if he knew that, he knew that we were always like going after,
giving him a hard time,
like using his name as a byword for like shitty, stupid thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he goes, and he keeps saying like, "You're an interesting cunt. You're an interesting cunt." And I'm like, "Oh, really? Yeah, maybe." And then he's like, "You're a comedian." And I was like, "Yeah." And then he's talking to someone else. He's like, "You know, man, you're always going to have haters. You're always going to have people criticizing you for no reason." Then he goes like this cunt, and pointing at me like, he's always hating me online. And then everyone just looks at me, and I'm like, "Yeah, you got me."
Yeah.
And sort of laugh. And he's like, "You are, aren't you?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess I am." He goes, "No, I respect you as a comedian, but you're always having a go at me." And I was like, "I am." And I just felt like I couldn't be like, "I'm really sorry." I had to be like, "Oh, yeah, you got me."
Yeah.
And I think that
Guilty.
I think that confused him, because I felt embarrassed, but I don't think I expressed it very strongly. And then he was like, "Okay." And then I went down back into the club, and someone comes up to me and they were like, Blindboy says he's going to come in just for your set. He's not going to miss it. And then Blindboy sat up pretty close to the front with comedians, just to the side. And then, luckily, the set went about as well as it possibly could have gone.
Yeah.
And he just left without saying anything. And it really felt like I was the hater. I was completely in the wrong, but I still won. Do you know what I mean? It was like if the bully won Karate Kid or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But I was just thinking about that in terms of what we were talking about before, because like it kind of feeds into everything really. But like he's bringing up a podcast that at that point had been off, like had an episode in about 2 years.
Yeah.
And like it was pretty much like an impetus to be like, fuck, maybe we should get back on the mic of Blindboy. It was like, you know, but I was just kind of, it's interesting that it affected him. And I think I was thinking about Stuart Lee, you know, when Stuart Lee has a go at like Ricky Gervais or James Corden, then they're all like really sensitive about it. You know, it used to be at the time, it'd be like, God, you're having a pop at me, like, you know, we're colleagues and like and it's just like, why are you? They're so sensitive because they really want the kind of approval of the subculture, you know, of this kind of like podcast with about 12 people listening to it. You know?
Yeah, I always felt the one person who was genuinely confused by Stuart Lee was Michael McIntyre.
Yeah.
Michael McIntyre had a joke about like, Stuart Lee, he had that one about like, so I'm Michael McIntyre, I'm not going to spoon feed you my warm diarrhea. And then, I can't remember exactly what he said, but I think Michael McIntyre was just like, what's going on? Like, he's just like, we're so far removed from each other in every sense. Like, not just like, I'm more successful than him, but just like, no one is like confusing the two of us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why are you going after me?
Yeah. There was
whereas like Gervais, like he wants to seem edgy and like he wants to be Stuart Lee. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Michael McIntyre, I can imagine he's just like, yeah, Stuart does his thing, I do mine. Mine's just like,
I imagine like as well, like with the innocuousness of like his material, he's kind of like, why would this elicit that reaction in you? And it's like, that's why I just like will understand that with Stuart Lee, where it's like, I mean, it's kind of similar with Blindboy, where it's like, why? Because I was trying to explain to my friend who's a former patron of the show from Australia, but he was like, why were you having a go at him? And I was like trying to explain it, and there was just like nothing I could come up with that didn't feel very like bitter and hateful.
I think it's just like Blindboy takes up a particular spot in the culture. And there's only one of those spots. Do you know what I mean? Like in Ireland, there's only one spot for like a guy with household recognition that talks about like politics in a way that's not completely just in the centre.
Yeah.
And he's just so bad at it. And he says so many stupid things. It makes me angry. Do you know what I mean?
Is that what you? Because like I don't know. Because I don't listen to all that much of him. I just like I have that kind of reflexive thing of like this fucking guy's got notions. Do you know?
Well, he also
like,
does. Like it's same vibe as Emma Kerwin. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah. Both of those guys, completely harmless, completely innocuous. Why do you care? Like, you know, Blindboy or like Rubber Bandits had a song about like guys walking into rivers and suicide and stuff, and then I'm just like, ugh. You know, it's just I have this reaction. It just kind of fucking I can't help it.
It's just like if there was no competition, it'd be fine. You know, if like, but it's just like I don't know.
But
it's
is there
like, I remember watching Emma Kerwin, and he was debating. It was during the last government, and he was debating. He was on prime time or some TV show, and he was debating some Fine Gael representative, and he goes like, you know, these people in government, they just don't care. They don't care about the homelessness. And then the Fine Gael guy was like, actually, I think that's really offensive. Like, we do care. We work really hard. And then Emma Kerwin apologized. He was like, I shouldn't have said that. And I was like, that is why you should not be where you are.
Yeah.
You should not be apologizing. Because that
Yeah.
guy's not apologizing for his belief, but you're apologizing. So then people just watch that and they're like, oh yeah, the lefty loony.
Yeah, like this is the consensus. Yeah. Well, also like just it feels like selected. Selecting your opponent, basically.
Yeah,
You know, and like it's always like now we're going to talk to the Harvard professor such and such about economics, and then we're going to talk to this guy who's got a Twitter profile. You know.
Yeah,
and it's just like it's just so like irritating because you know and it's a similar thing to I don't know if we said, but like the same with it's the Always Sunny thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I could put the trash into a landfill where it's going to stay for millions of years. Or I could burn it up and get a nice smoky smell in here and let that smoke go into the sky where it turns into stars.
That doesn't sound right, but I don't know enough about stars to dispute it.
Yeah, but I was thinking as well about Glenn Hansard because Glenn Hansard was on like Tommy Tiernan and the Tommy Tiernan show or something like that, and he was asked about Apollo House, and like, do you remember like Apollo House? It's like, oh, we occupied this building and had all these families in it, and it became like fucking I don't know, was Bono there? There was a bunch of like gobshite celebrities anyway.
There, but
there was all these celebrities trying to make a big show of it, and then once everybody was housed in Apollo House, it was like, well, that's the end of the housing crisis, I guess, you know?
Yeah,
and
that was nice.
like he was interviewed on the show, and he was asked about it, and he was kind of just saying like,
and that was something that kind of came out of just meeting friends and kind of there was an energy in Dublin at the time. I remember because I was living in town at the time, and there was an energy in Dublin of kind of like, what the fuck is going on? I mean, there was just a sense that the government weren't really doing anything, and there was more and more people becoming homeless. And of course, it's easy to sort of look at the homeless person as like, you know, the drug addict or the alcoholic, and sort of go, well, look, you know, they made poor choices, it's their own fault, and they can't keep a house down, they can't get their lives together, and you know, but that's only a tiny percentage of what's going on. I mean, it's, you know, the numbers are staggering. Because I only saw myself as a concerned citizen. I never thought about the left or the right. I was never into politics. It was never part of my thinking. I was just like, we need to do something, or it needs to be done. So I have to say afterwards, there was a huge sense of disappointment and almost cynicism about it because, you know, I'll take people at face value. If I'm sitting across from you and you're telling me that you're going to do something, you know, I would kind of take you at your word because you know, but then you sort of realize that the politics, and also the thing that really struck me at the time was how the public went against us. They got really behind us. Like, this is a great idea. And then suddenly the newspapers started chipping in here. And,
but was
you know,
what?
It just irritated me that he got involved and then was like, oh, actually, this is really hard. And then he just walked away. But one of the other things that he did was, he said in this interview was like, that Coveney sat across from him and made a bunch of commitments. And he's like, like, you know, I just have to kind of take him at his word. But like, you know, what are you supposed to do when somebody doesn't do what they said they're going to do? And it's like, fucking, like, what are you talking about? I guess go build a Curragh, make a Curragh in fucking Los Angeles and hang out in your house over there, you dumb piece of shit.
Because, like, yeah, like the issue wasn't that Hansard turned up to support the Apollo House. It's that he, like, took center stage.
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, see you fucking later. Like,
yeah.
He took power away from the people who are actually organising.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, they're not having people from the Revolutionary Housing League on these shows. They're having like Glenn Hansard, who ultimately doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Like, he knows it's a moral question, and he probably knows which side he lands on, but he doesn't know the details. You know?
I was also going to say about Blindboy as well, like, and that there might be like one role. It's like, but he is also trying to create space for other people to kind of fulfill those sort of, like, he does like reach out to, like, you know, it's not like he's like taking up all the space in that regard. Like, there is like a thing where he's like trying to take it outside of Dublin as well and make it less Dublin centric. But I don't. I do accept that there is only one person that the media will anoint. You know what I mean? And it becomes very frustrating to see him kind of up there and it just feels very like, wishy-washy and kind of non-committal. And actually, another one that would be better to reference was the Spice Bag. When Spice Bag was on Virgin Media Tonight, did you watch that?
Yeah, he was good.
It was so good. That was a moment where it was like, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this type of thing where like somebody confronts you. Like, so Fionn Sheehan like made an absolute fucking bollocks of himself, going like, and you're saying that you hate the guards, and then Spice Bag's like, yeah. Like, just that's it, you know? like not like some of these other people where it's like, you know, look, nobody's saying that they hate the guards. We all want the same thing. We're all looking for the same thing. It's like Spice Bag is there and he's like, you believe this, I believe this. We are the opposite sides. We're not rooting for the same thing. We want entirely different outcomes.
But what Adam's views about the Garda Síochána, that they aid bailiffs carrying out evictions, that they protect bailiffs, that the bailiffs are covered by the Gardaí. When he says, if God forbid a property developer doesn't get their way, they, on Garda Síochána, will be on it like a fly on shite.
The full unredacted quote reads, "These are the same guards who will ignore 3,000 domestic violence calls, but if, God forbid, a property developer doesn't get their way, they'll be on it like a fly on shite."
Okay, do you want to,
so what's
Adam,
Adam's view there?
do you want to answer?
Is that his respectful view of Garda Síochána?
Well, I guess my view on that would be that there's no way for the Gardaí to respond to an eviction, legal or illegal, other than turning up, standing up, and as you say, supporting the bailiffs, standing around doing that.
But Fiona, on this point, I do think it is important just to say we have Adam on talking about his artwork.
There's respect for Garda Síochána to uphold the law in a non-prejudicial basis.
But I want to say also that Adam is here as an artist who has pieces of art, who's put his work together, and surely he's entitled to do that as an artist.
He has politically motivated pieces of art.
Maybe then there's an issue with a politician retweeting that.
Which is
maybe
also,
that's
of course,
where the issue lies.
Of course, you also go to Northern Ireland and you get his view on the PSNI as well.
All right. Look, is it
politically
motivated, Adam? Do you want to answer that?
Well, I'd imagine everything everyone's saying on this panel is probably politically motivated in some way. We've two TDs here, so I don't know. My art is sorry, and you, George, I said too. But my art is political satire. I'm entitled to my own opinions, my own art. If you don't like them, that's your problem.
Like, that picture he made was so good. Like, we talk about like political cartoons all the time, and it's like that was only the best political cartoon. It was just like I know it was probably more than that, but it was like the famine house being the eviction, and then the guards facilitating the eviction. Yeah, and like it was so good because the immediate response was like, "No, that's not a fair comparison. Yeah, it's not fair." So why not? Well, that was different. They're throwing poor people out of their house. Like this, I'm not even making a straw man here. It was like that was like the British throwing people out of their house who had nothing. It's like that is like.
That's
now it's just Irish people. It's just Irish people doing it now. That's the only difference. Like, there's so many stories about the police turning up and just like, you're out on the street. We don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, the other one about Spice Bag as well is that he also supported like the Iceland workers on Talbot Street, and he was also at what's the house? Do you know the one where the landlord just evicted like the entire building, and then they overstayed? And they managed to get it back. Your man, what's the fucking house?
I can't remember.
Tahani House.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was there as well. And he does art for Kneecap as well. So, you know, he's a very like active kind of participant as opposed to being like a cultural commentator. It's like we're having like a Joe Rogan type character where you're just like teasing out the ideas and stuff. Although like one of the, like, I'm sorry to do this, but like I do feel very guilty about giving Blindboy a hard time despite all because he also, well, I got my words mixed up. Basically there's a studio, Jam Media, they made, they made animated shows, and then they made this like weird live action, like hybrid show with, a pitch that was originally developed by Graham Linehan and his then wife. And then they also have an animation festival called Animation Dingle, and like the animation industry likes to pretend that they're not the same thing, but they absolutely are, because one services the other. There's a whole podcast about it. James was on it. It's still online. I'll put the link in the description if you're interested in the details. But essentially, I saw Blindboy was speaking there, and I was like, I have to believe that Blindboy doesn't know this background. And then once he was informed about the background, he just pulled out of the event. Ultimately, that was a cause that Blindboy did get behind. And so I kind of like, I feel bad for giving him a hard time.
He's not evil, like, he's just a gobshite.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
And like, he can do good stuff and bad stuff.
Yeah. Like, I think the other one a thing that I want to mention is a story that came to mind as well was Brian Quimby on Street Fight Radio, now of the Guys podcast, which is worth a listen if you're interested in guys.
Street Fight Radio over.
Yeah, it was a mad, it was very sudden, but like something happened between the pair of them, and there was like, it seems that like their whole relationship broke down a little bit. And then also, basically, since 2020, like, he was like, I don't want to fucking talk about politics anymore because the world seems to just be getting so much worse. And so he decided to do just this podcast now called Guys, which is like about different types of guys. And it'll be like hot sauce guys, sex guys with Mike Hale, and they just look up like weird old men taking their dicks out, you know. And then one of them was Kevin Smith guys, which is very funny. Like, there's some of them are just so good where it's like, and
let's go up with the guy now.
Okay.
This
is a really bad thing for me. Like I said, like kind of slightly mushy brain. So the first thing I saw was like, we got a pumpkin. I was like, pumpkin guys.
Guy. Halloween guys.
Yeah, Halloween guys. That's the one. Yeah, we're like guys who are like way too into Halloween.
I feel like it's more of a woman thing.
Yeah, it is actually.
Maybe controversial to say.
No, it's not. It's funny
women
though.
Like Halloween.
Just because me and Zainab know some Halloween people, you know.
Yeah.
And, but I was like, well, it's more like his partner. And then you were like, I think it's more of a woman thing. I was like, I was literally just thinking that.
Yeah, I was literally too afraid to say.
Yeah. I just call.
Yeah, they like. I mean, it's always funny when you go to a house like where there's a lot of people are renting. If you ever see seasonal decorations up, there's a woman living in that house.
yeah.
The reality, and it's nice to see, but it's just a reality of it.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But anyway, Brian Quimby used to give out about Patton Oswalt all the time. And then Patton Oswalt came on his show, and then Brian Quimby was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was." And then Patton Oswalt was like, "No, like, you're supposed to do that." He's like, "I'm like a comedian here, and you're like doing your thing." Do you know?
Yeah.
Like he's not going like, "Oh, I'm above you." He's more like, he just understands that he has a certain place in the culture that means that you're supposed to skewer him if you're this type of comedian or podcaster or whatever. And that's what I found. Maybe Blindboy does think that, but I hope that he understands that it's from that place. Blindboy, come on the show. No, please don't.
Blindboy, please come on the show. Begging him to come on the show. We want to apologize to you in person.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to break this down. Episode 500, you know.
We're having both our dads and we're having
Blindboy. But like, I know this is a really long callback now, but I also I've been looking at this David McWilliams interview, and I wanted to get to the Friends of Israel part.
What was it again?
It's called The Rockstar Economist, and it was an interview that was conducted for in
the word
July.
rockstar.
Yeah.
Like, he used to refer to rock stars.
Yeah.
And then it referred to comedians.
Yeah.
The rockstar comedians. And now it's just the nerdiest fucking
exactly. Yeah.
It's
no,
like,
you're absolutely right.
Like, what in any way is rockstar about Dave McWilliams? You know what I mean?
They really do think that he is a rock because he's like, I don't wear a tie and I have like keep one or two buttons down on my shirt. It looks a little like it hasn't been ironed. And then also sometimes I'll reference like, I don't know, Star Wars when I'm talking about the IMF, you know?
That's it. It's like, yeah. I actually don't know anything about Star Wars to make a joke about that.
If my brain was working better today, I'd really have one ready because I've been watching a lot of Star Wars. I watched so much fucking prequel shit.
Ursula von der Leyen, she's like Darth Vader.
Yeah. It's what I like to call Darth Vader, the Darth Vader effect. Okay.
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm trying to think. Fuck this.
Maybe he'd be like, you know, the death is like the Force. You know, it like
yes,
it's everywhere.
Okay.
Some people can control it better than others, and it gives people power. It's like, and like Ursula von der Leyen, you know, she's like a Jedi. You know, she like understands the Force and how to wield it when necessary. You know, I mean that sort of stuff. Whereas I'd say she's more like
Chewbacca or something. Count Dooku.
Who's the most evil person in Star Wars?
Darth Sidious, so probably Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah, she's more like Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah.
You know, she's cruel.
Yeah.
Sort of hidden. And, you know, hates
pulling the strings.
Hates Palestinians.
Unelected also. Yeah.
Unelected. And has a secret army.
Oh God. Let's tease this out a bit more. We're getting a lot of fucking there's a lot of parallels here. Yeah. All right, I guess that's it. Actually, I guess we squeezed all the juice out of that fruit. But that's that it was a juicy fruit, and I'm not talking about the chewing gum.
Yeah, I'm not talking about.
But look at this one here. I just wanted to read this, even though this is not really anything to do with my point, and it is a lot of text. But
so this is the rock star, economicist,
where the guy is a little more like kind of pushing back on some of the stuff that Dave McWilliams says. So, what's this guy's name? Just so I have it right. MC stands for fucking McDonald's. Yeah, I don't know what his name is. Oh, Miriam Cotton from MediaBite.
What about something called the Economicon? You know, the Necronomicon?
Oh, man, yeah.
That'd be good.
I'm trying to think. But, like, you know the way the Necronomicon is made out of human skin?
Yeah, I think the Economicon would also be made out of human.
So Miriam asks him, with regard to the 2008 bank guarantee, people have accused you of inconsistency about this, in that at first you appeared to claim that the Minister of Finance, Brian Lenihan, was acting on your advice. Since then, you seem to have distanced yourself from the guarantee to some extent. Dave McWilliams. That's not true, Miriam. Did you change your mind, or was there some material difference between what you recommended and what Brian Lenihan has done? Dave McWilliams. Well, first of all, I don't think changing your mind is the end of the world. The bank guarantee that I discussed with Brian Lenihan involved a guarantee that would be rescinded after 2 years specifically. In a way, it was a bluff, not a policy. Once this guarantee started to be regarded as a blanket underpinning of all sorts of loans, then it changed materially from what I was discussing with the Minister for Finance. The first thing is, if Brian Lenihan lets the guarantee lapse after 2 years, which it is legally supposed to, then it was his work completely. Then we're back to square one, whereby we are in a position where we can simply get the creditors into the room and say, listen lads, we've no money. The whole idea was supposed to stop a run on the banks, which I think is an important thing to do. It's like being a fireman in a forest fire, where you have to ask yourself whether you stop it or let it blaze on. And the second thing is, the guarantee is given 2 years to figure out how bad things are at the banks. And it's not just Anglo, it's across the board. Once you've figured it out, you simply withdraw the credit and say to creditors, sorry guys, you simply backed the wrong horse and let's do a deal. And that's capitalism. But what's happened in the last while is that the banks and the Minister for Finance seem to have become one and the same thing. And it's being said that what is good for the banks is automatically good for us. And that's not actually the case. Arguably, what is good for the Irish banks now is bad for us. So that's where you let it lapse and you go back to a purer system where the state has no involvement. Okay?
Right.
So what he's basically saying, like, I don't really, like, I'll go and parse it some other day. But, like, the thing that I always felt is that, like, he has the ear of very influential people. He's got very generic, like, liberal economic opinions. Yeah. And then he, like, espouses them. And then if they backfire, he just immediately walks away from them and tries to do these kind of like, listen, lads, and got, you know, that type of fucking La Cheeky Nando's type fucking talking points.
Yeah, like, his idea there was basically like, we need to bring back pure capitalism.
Yeah, exactly.
That seems to be essentially it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean...
Well, she pushes back. She actually says, but didn't you depart from your capitalist principles by recommending a guarantee in the first place? And so anyway, they go on it back and forth. You can read the whole interview yourself, but just to give you an idea of the type of questions that are happening, you know?
Yeah.
But there's a great bit. The next bit, the one that really like... So Miriam asks him, would you agree that media coverage of the left is A, virtually non-existent, and B, extraordinarily biased in a hostile and rather superficial way? The crimes of the 20th century Stalinist socialism were held up as an inevitable outcome of trying to create a fairer society, yet the crimes of capitalists over several centuries go virtually unremarked in many instances. Genocidal land and resource grabs have been going on all the way down the line, but they're sanitized and sold in the same name of God and democracy. David McWilliams. Do you think so? Miriam. Yes, absolutely. David McWilliams. I don't see the world that way. Take the war in Iraq, for example. There was almost uniform condemnation in the media. Miriam. Not at all.
Yeah.
Just like, and he goes, David McWilliams, I'd have said that was a logical position, that the United States was simply fighting an unjust war. However appalling Saddam was, and I'm not sure he was more appalling than people in other places who've been propped up. But my point is that if you look here, for example, Partnership is a great example of the social democratic left of centre that is almost uniform media support. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. He goes on and on. He talks about Ireland, Catholic country, but he's just so like boring and ordinary, but for some reason, like he has this. Yeah,
it's like some of this stuff is nearly like Holocaust denial. Do you know what I mean? It's like denying that there was. He's like, oh, sure, no one liked the response.
Yeah, the media condemned the war in Iraq,
which is they didn't completely go to bat.
Yeah,
and like this weird recidivism or revisionism around the bailout. It's like when Micheál Martin was like, there was never a bailout.
Yeah.
It's like they're just trying to rewrite the history a bit. You know?
Or like whatever they need to say in that moment to be able to get out of the situation that they're in. And they also, like, in doing so, they obviously believe that their politics and way of thinking are just like, you know, what's the word? You know, the people, common sense. They're just normal. They are legitimate, you know? And then they kind of pretend that they're interested in this idea of debate. And then when she like presents him with this debate, he just kind of tries to weasel his way out of it. Oh, actually, I didn't do that. And actually, I didn't think that.
Yeah.
And it couldn't have been the thing that I suggested because the thing that I suggested would have worked, you know?
I know. Like, his response to the bailout, or his response to the crash was like, we need more unfettered capitalism, where like the government and the markets are not linked in any way.
Yeah.
And I'm just proposing a tiny little intervention, supposedly. Yeah. And it's like, what do you think caused the crash?
Yeah.
Like, it's exactly what you're describing. Like, I
just don't know how he has the reputation that he does, because like people seem to think of him as like a lefty or kind of like center left, as in like the type of like, you know, Fintan O'Toole intellectual that they allow, you know.
How fucking bizarre Irish politics is, or like like European politics. It's like he is probably considered left by a lot of politicians, but like that's mad. That he's essentially just an old school liberal. He's like, and they're like, oh, he's a lefty loony, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they obviously don't consider him that left because they're happy to talk and listen to him and stuff. But it's it's crazy how like centralized it's become.
Well, that's it. And again, it's like, you know, what we were talking about isn't like choosing your opponents that you get to talk to on all of these panel shows, you know, and you're only ever talking about this like very narrow set of things. So it becomes like, you know, how do you want to implement plan A, you know, as opposed to why isn't there a plan B, and A and B talk about the differences between each other, you know?
I know. It's sort of like how you talk to a toddler. It's like, do you want to bail out the banks for a little while, or do you want to bail them out forever?
Yes, exactly.
Do you want like a minor intervention or a major?
Yeah. And it's also like the war in Iraq, the recession. If you held a certain opinion at the time, I think you should be persona non grata forever. Do you know what I mean? We shouldn't be interviewing you or looking for your opinion. Like if you're Alistair Campbell and you're just like, I have some thoughts about Brexit. It's like, well, you don't get to voice those thoughts in the public space anymore because of Iraq, you know?
Yeah.
And then if you're like David McWilliams and you're like, oh yeah, like they did listen to me, they did what I said, but actually they didn't do it right. So actually technically I'm still guilty. It's like, you are an economist at the time who was saying that we need to do this, okay?
Yeah.
So we do not need to hear from you ever again about anything to do with your fucking witchcraft, you know?
I know.
But anyway, here's the part with so she asks him.
To hear the full episode, go to patreon.com/Celtic Ligers.